Hi, hello, I'm Arvind, and today we are going to talk about single sign-on in the Elastic Byte. So, Elastic Cloud supports multiple single sign-on options, namely SAML and OpenID and Kerberos. So today we are going to take an example of SAML and with an identity provider and explain how you could connect it with an Elastic deployment on Elastic Cloud. So before that, I would also want to specifically tell that this the demo details will be the presentation. I'll try to link it down in the presentation so that if you have any doubt regarding the settings, you could directly use it. Now on to the presentation. I'm using Auth0 as the identity provider here, but this is how the SAML workflow would go like. Like you have an identification provider, which in our case is an Auth0, and then you have a client and a resource server. The user usually attempts to access the resource, which he or she will be directed to the identification provider where he needs to fill in the requested credentials, which on top again when it is fulfilled will be returned back to the resource server and he is supplied with the requested resource. So this is how the entire SAML sequence would go like. And we are using, like I said in the previously, we are using Auth0. So using Auth0 console or the Terraform provider, you could directly create this app and invoke everything. But in the interest of showing it on the console, I'm just using the Auth0's console here, which you could see. Like you could sign up for Auth0 or like you a trial account, or you could also, if you have subscription, you could use this. You need to create an application initially, which is a regular web application. Let us name it Kibana SSO, and then you could simply go ahead and skip the any integration. But we are looking for a SAML integration, so I'm just adding SAML add-ons. So and then enable the SAML. It will take a minute to sometimes show you this settings page. The important thing here is you need to add your callback URL, and you need to set some logout specific information. So the protocol settings that you need to set. So some of these are given here, like what sort of binding you need to add, etc. So I have that ready already in the slide. So for example, your callback URL is the URL wherein your Kibana URL, that is where you are trying to do the SSO login. So your Kibana will be the place where you add all of these logout and callback functionalities. Of course, you need to, if you are implementing, if you are implementing the SAML, you need to be compliant with all the protocol definitions and spec. So I'm just gonna go ahead and give this URL here. But anyway, I forgot to mention that I already have Elastic Cloud deployment deployed in the Elastic Cloud, and then I just want to copy the endpoint from here, Kibana endpoint, and then add it here. So now I have a callback URL. In a similar fashion, I also need to configure other settings which are related to logout. And you could also choose to add more settings that are like there are more information in the protocol, which is also given here. But I'm just adding the logout functionality here. Again, your Kibana URL is the URL that you need to append here. And I suspect, like if you are looking at different providers, the UI and the spec might be a bit changed, but not the protocol details. Like how the callback URL is configured, with what bindings it is being given. All of those would not change, but then the UI and etc. Might change. So let us quickly enable it. Again, in some cases, it might take a few minutes to kind of showcase this one. Now let us quickly go to the settings part where you see all the client ID, client secret, etc. For your application. This is the identity provider and where you are trying to authorize, through which you are trying to authorize into Kibana. And you also see the callback URLs that is configured. You could have multiple of them, but we are configuring one here. And then you have, let's come to the advanced settings, wherein go to the endpoints, and then you have one SAML metadata URL. Basically, SAML is like an XML that you contain, and then which will have all the details regarding your entity ID, attributes that you want to authenticate with, so all of that. So let us quickly copy this one and download this XML. So just by saving this, you will see this. Um, you will see this downloaded. I'll open that with my favorite VS Code. As you could see, it is a wholesome. It's a lot of XML details, and wherein you would see some specific like the binding that we have given, and attributes that we need to configure, all of that actually. Okay, once you save this metadata XML, you need to give all of this information into the Elasticsearch and Kibana so that the realm is set up, and then you could log in, create a role, and then log in into the Kibana using the SSO. So I already have the Elasticsearch configuration here. Let us copy this one into the VS Code. So let us copy into the tab, and then you could figure out these details, which are already available from the Auth0 console, or you already have it in the like the XML. So the SAML metadata URL is the URL that we need to copy from here, and then you have the entity ID, which is available in the XML that we have, the entity ID for our app. And then you have the Kibana URL, which is very important. Let us copy the Kibana endpoint. And the same Kibana URL with the callback where it is really being called back in, and the logout functionality when you click on logout. So that it will redirect back to the place where you have come from. So this is related to Elasticsearch. And you also have similar sort of configuration details that are needed for the Kibana, but it's relatively smaller, where you need to tell like what sort of logo that should appear and what message that you have. So let us put in this information first of all into the Elasticsearch. You can do it with the Terraform script. You need to click the save button. Once you paste this one, you will not have save here. You need to click onto the save button. This might change over a period of time. The UI might change, but then you need to just click on the save button every time at the end for the changes to take effect. So do remember that. And then again, let us head to the Kibana related user settings. So let us remove this, and then I have the configuration for the Kibana here. So I'm just making sure that I don't make any mistakes while configuring, so that we'll not have. So do remember that we are giving the realm names as Elastic Byte. The realm previously in the Elasticsearch also is given as Elastic Byte. So do remember that you need to give the same name. You could also use any name, but make sure that the realm names that you are configuring are given properly. And then I have given a description login with Auth0. If you have specific name for your SSO, like you want to do a custom name, you could do that. And again, typical for Teams, you could do that. You could paste a SVG here for appearing a specific sort of logo. So all of this is possible. So now that I have saved, I will click on save all of this information, because I think once you save it, only the configuration changes will be happening. It will take 2 to 3 minutes sometimes, and then you will simply get to see the results, and then we will do the role mapping right after. Let us head to the Kibana and create the role mapping for the realm that we have created. So you could also do it on the UI, but I'm just using the API to kind of do this. So let us go here, explore on my own. Tools. So here I'm just creating a role mapping with Elastic Byte with roles as Kibana admin, so that you could do everything. Okay. So you could go and see the role mapping here. You could see that we have created a role map to Elastic Byte. Now, the best thing is to verify how you could log into this particular thing is to copy the Kibana URL, open an incognito window, and try logging it to using the Auth0. So we could also enable social logins into the using the auth provider. So let me go to the social login here, like wherein you could see I have already enabled for the newly created app as well, like Kibana SSO. So let us open Kibana in a incognito window. And you see that instead of asking for user ID, login with Elastic Load, it's saying like login with auth0. And then when you click that, it should redirect us to the auth0 app. And then instead of that, I'll giving the user, because I don't have any users in my app, I'll just keep clicking continue with Google. And then it will ask me to the login with my Google ID. Let me try to do that. And then you see that you are logged into the Kibana. So this way you could ensure that you could add a SAML based authentication provider to your Elastic Cloud this thing. So that's it for today. And if you have more questions, please ask me on the comments, and I'll share the information related to the config